Well, hello, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right, good to hear. You know, us Costa Ricans have always been known for being highly unpunctual. And here with my North American brethren, I realized that I'm always usually the first one to join.
Well, it says 8 o'clock on my end, so I figured I'm right on time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good morning.
Well, good morning, brother. Hello, how you doing this morning?
I'm well. What about you?
Good. I'm beyond blessed. I'm so good, brother.
Good.
Yes, sir.
All right. By whatever the time that's coming off the tower, we've got 2 minutes. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna let everybody have 2 minutes to get in class.
Yes, sir.
My wife's needing some help this morning, so I've got 1 minute. I'm gonna move my son's dog's bed and put it close to me.
He's
I'll be
okay.
right
Yeah.
back. Want me to move this over here again? I'll put this back later, okay? Want me to bring it with me over here? There you go. There you go. You can stay with me. There you go. All right. There you go. Well, I see the only two faithful fellas are right here. uh, my
Oh,
son was trying out in Alabama yesterday. Uh, so uh, he said he'd probably listen by telephone. So
hmm.
I hope he's able to do that. But if not, he can watch the video maybe in a little bit. This is the only class I've ever taught him in for the school. Of course, he's been in my house. He's learned a few things.
Well, that's a double authority for him. That's father and professor as well. That's quite a frightening thing.
Yeah. Taylor, how you doing? You're muted.
Sorry.
There.
I tend to keep it muted because you never know
No, I
around
know.
my place what you're gonna hear.
Yeah.
Kids
Well,
and between
I
kids
think
and pets, you never know.
how many children do you have?
I do have two children, but I'm in my office. So I try to keep the door locked, but it ain't locked today. Uh
Well, that's all
on
right.
the what was that? The David Spruill files. I
Yes.
was able to watch his video, but the links to his the audio on Google Drive or whatever it was, I'm not able to listen to that.
Okay.
I haven't
Okay.
able to open that.
I'm not a good one to tell you. I'll tell you what you might go to okay, he's in Palm Beach Lakes. He's with the Palm Beach Lakes Church in Florida.
Yeah,
Forget if it's called West or North. It's some
I don't know.
direction. What is it?
I found their YouTube page. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
Uh,
know if it was something different or if it was just that
no,
the audio for that Daniel series.
you should be able to get it there. If the video works, use and you can use it, use it. But if you want the audio, you come off their internet because honestly, I didn't make the file available by video. I'm technologically ignorant.
Well, that makes two of us.
So, so it may be a simple thing, but it wouldn't be simple for me. I'll put it that way. All right, we're ready to start in Daniel. We're in Daniel chapter 2. Hopefully, everybody recalls that. And we're talking about God knows our dreams, which, of course, in this chapter, applies preeminently to Nebuchadnezzar, obviously. But he knows all about us too. We don't usually talk about that. I do not know if God today in any wise communicates through dreams. If he does, I wouldn't know how to translate one. So my suspicion is he does not. But if you take a different position, I'd love to hear how you got there, because I'm not sure I can get there. But nonetheless, in this era that we're dealing with, God did at times miraculously communicate with individuals. Nebuchadnezzar is probably one of the last guys we would have picked to say he did that. You expect him to communicate with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, but Daniel's king, Nebuchadnezzar, I don't know. But God does, and it's how he works, and his working is not something open to question from us, I guess would be the way I'd put it. So we got the other day into the best part of this. Daniel was just talking to the king about what he had asked. I'm going to back up and begin to read from verse 26. That sets up the mindset of the king, but Daniel's going to quickly correct that, and we already observed that, but we'll go on from there. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, "Are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation?" Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayers cannot declare to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he's made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be." Now, something I think we need to remember is that prophets are forth tellers. Listen to the word, it's Forth, tellers. Sometimes they are foretellers, Fore, tellers. But we don't want to arrive at the conclusion that they always speak about the future. In this case, we're going to talk about the future, but that's not always true. Sometimes God communicates something that is immediate. It has to do with a particular point in time, and a man who is a spokesman for God, a prophet, will deliver a message. So I want us to be sure when we're talking to people about the Bible that we correctly say they are forth tellers. And then sometimes they are foretellers. But if they are, then God's the one doing it. And that's what Daniel's saying here. He's saying God's showing us what's coming in the future. He has shown you, Nebuchadnezzar, what is coming in the future. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now, we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. I don't know about you, but when I hear the description of the dream, I can understand why the king was troubled. I mean, what does this mean? What could it possibly mean? And from the human perspective, and that's already been noted, even wise men didn't know. Only the God of heaven. And by the way, Daniel doesn't say little g gods like the wise men had said earlier. Instead, he says a God in heaven, and he uses singular. There's one God in Daniel's view, and that's very clear already from what he's told the king. I'm not certain that Daniel is able to thoroughly convey that to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I'm not saying he didn't tell him. I'm not sure that Nebuchadnezzar really fully understood this. One God? No, he's used to multiple gods. He doesn't have a problem with Daniel having a powerful God that he worships. He's going to have a problem with that there aren't multiple gods. He is a polytheist, in other words, not a monotheist in any sense of the word. We should note, as we already, I think, may have in the previous class, that only God knows the thoughts of man's heart. And this is something we need to learn in working with God's people. You can't read minds. I can't either. I can remember when we early on in our marriage, Teresa and I moved from Henderson, Tennessee to North Little Rock, Arkansas. And I remember after we'd been there a certain period of time, we were getting to know all the people pretty well. And Teresa one day said to me that a certain one of the ladies, she said, I think one of the late sisters here is mad at me. I said, well, why do you think that? And she said, well, I was walking down the hall and she looked away when I was walking by. And I said, well, let me ask you something. Is it possible that she has some sort of a problem that's on her mind? And Teresa said, well, yeah, I guess she could have a problem on her mind. I said, okay, is it also possible that she and her husband had a disagreement in the car right before they got to the church building? And she said, yeah, I guess that's possible. I said, well, is it also possible that maybe one of her children is sick or is having a real issue at school or something? Is that a possibility? And she said, well, yeah, it is. And I said, well, then here's what I've learned, and I'm a preacher's son, okay? So, so I've been exposed to this for a long time. I said, I take the view that I only know what you tell me. If you're mad at me, you're going to tell me you're mad. If I've hurt your feelings, you're going to have to tell me that I've hurt your feelings. And brethren, we need to learn, and sister, sorry, Francine. I know there is a sister here. Okay, so we need to learn to to just be God's people. Be transparent in the way you deal with people. If you got a problem with somebody, go to them. Don't tell it to a brother or sister other than them. Tell them. And if they have a problem with you, you can let it be known. I don't mind. Get up in the pulpit and someday, and it'll flow out of a lesson you're delivering sometime, and just say, brethren, if you're upset with me, you have a biblical obligation to come to me, and that's what I expect you to do. So anyway, I've gone a little bit far afield there, but I think that's important when you're working with the Lord's people. Oh, through the wisdom God gave him, Daniel let Nebuchadnezzar know the dream. We have just read the entire dream. Now we're getting ready to see exactly what the meaning of the dream is. And so we're going to go on down starting at about verse 36. 7. You, O king, are king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of heaven, he's given them into your hand and has made you a ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. Now, hold that particular verse, hold that in your mind because it's going to come back up in a sense of the word in chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar is going to have another dream or vision. And in that dream, we're going to see a greater emphasis on just this one verse. But for the time being, as we look at this dream that is being presented to us, what we have learned is that Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold on this great image that he saw. And what we're going to see now is four great world powers. And I do not think that any of us really understands this concept as well as they would have. The dominant power in the whole world at that time was Babylon. They pretty much controlled everything at that particular point in time. They're going to be followed by another world empire that's going to be equally powerful. Well, not quite equal, but it's going to be just slightly less. And that'll be followed by another world power and another world power. And then God's going to establish his kingdom. That's what we're about to see. So we begin with Babylon. That Nebuchadnezzar is over. Now, Ezekiel chapter 26, verse 7, talks a little bit about some portion of this. Listen to what it says. For thus says the Lord God, behold, I'll bring against Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses, with chariots, and with horsemen, and an army with many people. I want us to understand God is using Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar may think he's in charge. He's not. God's in charge. And that is a critical matter. And that's the reason that one of your assignments is to write a lesson on the sovereignty of God, that God rules. And we see it right here with this great, powerful ruler who God, through a dream, acknowledges that he's a powerful ruler. But he's powerful because God made him that way. And
What
that's
was
what
that Ezekiel passage again, Brother Hampton?
okay, it is in your note. You should have the PowerPoints in the LMS. And I've looked at most of that and I think it's there. But anyway, it's Ezekiel 26, verse 7.
Thank
Now
you.
let's also look at Jeremiah chapter 27, and we're going to look at verses 5 through 7 there. Jeremiah 27, beginning at verse 5. I've made the earth, the man, and the beast that are on the ground, by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it to whom it seemed proper to me. Remember that verse when we get to chapter 4. We're still talking about the same thing. Who puts people in power? God does. And brethren, we need to quit as Christians. We need to quit saying, "Well, I don't like this president. I don't like this prime minister, whoever it is, is in power in your nation, wherever you may be." We need to quit talking about that because God put them there. Now, you might say, well, he's a pretty mean fellow. I'm surprised God's going to use him. How's he going to use him? I don't know, but he will. That I do know. All right, verse 6, still in Jeremiah chapter 27. And now I've given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beasts of the field I've also given him to serve him. So all nations shall serve him, and his son and his son's son, until the time of his land comes. And then many nations and great kings shall make him serve them. Now, obviously, there, Nebuchadnezzar, when he says make him serve them, he's not talking about Nebuchadnezzar, he'll be dead. But he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar as the representative head of a nation, the nation of Babylon. That's what he's talking about. So, who made Nebuchadnezzar great? God did. Nebuchadnezzar represents a kingdom which will be followed by three more, and that's what we're getting ready to see. Is the next kingdom that comes into view. All right. But after you, verse 39, shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces. I'm sorry, Gunny, be quiet. Breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they'll mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. All right, so what's the second kingdom? The second kingdom is the Medo-Persian Empire. Babylon will be conquered by the Medo-Persian Empire. And I always forget what I've told. I teach too many classes, so I always forget what I told what class. Did I tell you how Cyrus was able to conquer Babylon? Okay, I think I told that to my New Testament church class on Saturday. That's right. That's who I think I told it to. Okay, you may remember that in the ancient world they had seven wonders, just like we now have seven wonders of the modern world. One of those wonders was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Those gardens were fed by water from the river that flowed literally under the walls of the city. And the way that Nebuchadnezzar arranged all this through his people is that he caused them to put up gates, if you would. And when they wanted to water the garden, they would lift the gates. And boy, like in Arkansas and Louisiana, in the rice fields, you'll see this. They still do it this way. So you lift up the gates, and the water from the river flows through those gates and into all the various irrigation canals that have been built in or dug into the garden. Okay, so along comes Cyrus, and he faces this great city of Babylon, which they say the wall was big enough that you at least could have raced two chariots side by side around the top of the wall. That's how wide it was. Huge. Now you can imagine no king wants to have to use a battering ram to knock that wall down, to knock a hole in it. It's going to take a long time. You're going to have to hit it again and again and again. So Cyrus studied the situation, and he had his men to lift up the gates so that the water flowed into the hanging gardens of Babylon. That lowered the level of the water, and the army marched into the city under the wall in the river. And that's how they conquered it. So the next great empire is the Medo-Persian Empire. The third, the brass empire, is the Greek Empire, led by a fellow by the name of Alexander the Great. Most people have heard of him, at least. Alexander conquered the best part of the known world before he was 32 years old. He was the original initiator of what later the Germans called Blitzkrieg. He'd strike fast. He was very, very difficult to deal with. He conquered the Medo-Persian Empire. Now he conquered them partly as a motive of revenge, because his dad was Philip of Macedon, and Philip of Macedon had been defeated by the Medes and the Persians. And so here comes Alexander the Great, and one of his first challenges was to defeat the nation, the army that had defeated his dad. And so that's what he does. It's interesting, according to Josephus. Now, Josephus is a historian, but I'm not telling you he absolutely knows the truth. He'll report what he's learned. Okay, so it may be true, it may be just historical rumor, or a historical myth that could happen. But he claims that when Alexander the Great came to Jerusalem, that somebody showed him the Bible and some of these descriptions, like here, and that he immediately said, "Oh, that's me." He knew who he was talking about. I think Cyrus may have been informed about what God had said about Cyrus years before his birth, but we're not studying Jeremiah, so I'll just, for the time being, just make that statement, and you can think about it yourself. The third empire or the fourth empire is the Roman Empire. And Rome was a powerful nation. And initially, it was like iron, just smashing everything in sight. The problem is that as Rome conquered more and more nations, they did not assimilate those nations into Rome. Instead, they have all these different people, and they're all part of this great. It's really more of an amalgamation, as it were, of people, and they don't go together well. And so ultimately, when Rome collapses, it collapses partly because of that, and that thus you have the feet of iron mixed with clay. The clay would be the intermingling of the nations that they never got to really be absorbed into or assimilated into their culture. And the same thing can happen today to any nation. In fact, I think the United States struggles with that a little bit right now. We've allowed too many people in too fast, and they're not assimilating. Now, that's not an attack on those people. It's just saying it takes time to learn what it's like somewhere. I'll never forget going to Malawi, Africa, and in the questions that the preacher students asked at night, one of them asked, "What should we do about witches?" And I started to describe how we ought to respond to witches, and my interpreter stopped, and he leaned over to me and he said, "You don't understand what they're talking about." I said, "Oh, what are they talking about?" And he said, "Well, in Malawi, when somebody dies, they always die because of a witch." And he says, it's not a witch like you're thinking about. He said, let's say that, and I'm going to use an example from class. Let's say that Mario and I get in a big argument at the end of class today. And then when I leave class, I go out and I'm killed in an automobile accident. Well, then Mario's a witch. That's their view. Now don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that's my view, but that was their view. And thus, in Malawi, a witch doctor is a man who gives you potions so that you won't die from these unknown witches. That's what he does. So I didn't know anything about that. That's not my culture. And I'm thankful I had a good interpreter that took the time to tell me, because I was about to tell them things that were not really quite true. They really wouldn't answer their question. because they've assumed what I don't even believe is reality. They've assumed that it's that way. Okay, so that's all I'm talking about. I'm not attacking anybody. I'm just saying it takes time to be absorbed into a culture. It would take time for me to go to the Philippines and be absorbed into that culture. I'd be well, I don't know what they'd call me in Mexico. I'd be called a gringo, but and maybe that's what they call me in the Philippines. I don't know, but the deal is I don't know their culture, and it would take time for them to see that I really appreciated them for who they are, and that I was trying to understand their culture and become part of it. So that's all I'm saying. So Rome collapsed because of that. So the critical verse, if you don't learn another verse in this chapter, you really need to learn verse 44. Now we've gone through four kingdoms. We're in the last kingdom, the kingdom of Rome. And now Daniel says, in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Now, I think we need to learn this verse and hang on to it. The premillennialist is going to tell you that God intended for Jesus to set up a kingdom on earth when he came to earth, but that the Jews rejected him, and so God ran in a last minute substitute called the church. That is false. And this passage shows that it's false. If Jesus did not set up a kingdom in the days of the Roman kings, then God's a liar. I'm trying to be nice about it, but that's what it would be. God's a liar if Jesus did not set up a kingdom. Now, I believe you know as well as I do that God did set up a kingdom. So God fulfilled exactly what he had foretold. Did I promise this class something about Jeremiah last time?
Well, it was me. You promised to speak about or speak on Jeremiah 22.
Yes. All right. I think this would be a good time to do that. Go to Jeremiah 22. I know Jeremiah is not Daniel, okay, everybody? Just so you know, I actually recognize they're different. But Jeremiah chapter 22, and we're going to look at the closing verses of that chapter. I believe it's closing, I'm pretty certain. Yes, 28 through 30. All right, here we go. Is this man Coniah a despised, broken idol? All right, in the Old Testament, there was a king of God's people, Jeconiah, also known as Coniah. Okay, so don't get confused. You can put Jeconiah there. He had two names. That's not unusual. You know, my dad's name was Robert. Everybody called him Bob. So, he had two names. Is Robert the same as Bob? Well, not spelled the same, but he's the same guy. When he was alive, he was the same person. So Coniah and Jeconiah are the same person. So I'll start again. Is this man Coniah a despised, broken idol, a vessel in which is no pleasure? Why are they cast out, he and his descendants, and cast into a land which they do not know? What land is that, by the way? That's Babylon. That's Daniel being cast out, as it were, being he and his friends being absorbed into Babylon. O earth, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, write this man down as childless. Now, wait a minute. If you just go back up to the 28th verse, it said he and his descendants. Is he childless? No, not physically. But keep reading. a man who shall not prosper in his days, for none of his descendants, by the way, that would mean he had children, none of his descendants shall prosper sitting on the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. If Jesus Christ is the descendant of Coniah, that's going to give us a definite conclusion. So turn to Matthew chapter 1. In Matthew chapter 1, you'll remember that the book begins with the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And as you get down through there, go down to verse 11. Josiah begat Jeconiah and his brothers about the time they were carried away to Babylon. And after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconiah begat Shealtiel, and Shealtiel begot Zerubbabel. All right, he's not childless then, not in the physical sense. But does a son of Jeconiah ever rule on the throne in Jerusalem? The answer is no, he does not. So I'm going to say essentially the same thing I said earlier. If you read Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 28 to 30, and you then realize from Matthew chapter 1 that Jesus is a descendant of Jeconiah, then if Jesus ever comes back to earth and reigns for 1,000 years in Jerusalem, then God is a liar. Because God said no descendant of Jeconiah or Coniah will ever rule in Jerusalem and prosper. And 1,000 years sounds like prosperity to me. What about you? Yeah. All right. Any questions about that? That's a subset of what we're talking about here. Any questions on that?
Oh, brother, you have convinced me. What are the most common objections you would hear to this position?
Yeah. The funny thing is, Jim Waldron's the one who introduced me to this. He had a debate with a Christadelphian that's in Australia. Uh, and Christadelphians are premillennial. And when he presented this argument, there was no good answer. That I don't know a good answer to this. I don't even know a halfway strong. Obviously, it wouldn't be a really strong answer because it won't answer it. But I don't even know. I don't know of a weak answer to this argument. This is destructive, very much so. And when I couple it with Daniel chapter 2, verse 44, then I think that it's obvious that premillennialism is wrong. It's just wrong. You can't take that position and be correct. You can take it, but you won't be right if you do
Hey,
it.
Brother Hampton,
Yes.
what are all of the stances of premillennialism? Is it just the basic Christ will come back to earth to rule for 1,000 years? Is that the core principle in that?
Yeah, that core principle would be true in premillennialism. There are various types of premillennialism. The one you probably are most familiar with is dispensational premillennialism. Let me, maybe I can get Dave to send you, to put in the LMS. I have a PowerPoint where I go into premillennialism a little bit. And there's a guy named, notice I said a guy because the name won't sound right. There's a guy named Lorraine Boatner who wrote a book on the millennium. And he showed all three views of the millennium, which is premillennialism, postmillennialism, and millennialism. And he covers all of those. But he's got a great chart on dispensational premillennialism. That is probably what you bumped into. It would surprise me if you have not. But the basic doctrine for premillennialism is that Jesus will rule on a throne in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And by the way, we have had multiple presidents in the United States who believed that. And because they believed it, it impacted the way they dealt with world situations. Now, I think Israel, the physical nation now, is a great ally for the United States, but I don't think that we need to support them because the Bible says God's going to bless everybody that supports them. I don't buy that. I don't think that's true. I think that's a false statement. So I just think they happen to be a good ally.
Oh, brother. Yes, I appreciate this comment from you. I believe that premillennialists also hold that Jesus, when he comes back and reigns in 1,000 years, he would also establish the temple and the law of Moses again. Is that right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
believe that that'd be quite a weak point in that position as well, right?
Yes, it would be. You won't be able, they, not you, it's in you, but they won't be able to establish that position. The temple now, the temple actually is a foreshadow of what the church and heaven will be. So the holy place represents the church, and the most holy place represents heaven. And we go into all that. I'll tell you what, you might ought to write some of these things down, put a note, and if we have time at the end of the Daniel class, if we got some class time left over, we'll go into a deeper discussion of that. Uh, I have a lot of material on it, so I'm afraid to go off into it now because technically this is supposed to be about Daniel. Okay. All right. In the days of the Roman kings, God's going to set up a kingdom. Notice, by the way, something very interesting. In verse 45, particularly, inasmuch, see, so inasmuch is explaining what's said in 44. In 44, it says, in the days of these kings, God's going to set up a kingdom. In 45, he explains how the dream foreshadowed that or foretold that. And he says, inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, no man cut out this stone. Where did the stone come from? Well, it's God cut it out. See? So it was cut out without hands, and it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. The great God, now we're back to that same, remember, the great God. He doesn't say one of many, the great God. The great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Now, if God caused Daniel to say the dream is certain, and I believe he did, and it does not happen, it did not happen, then again, God's a liar, and that won't work. I don't buy that. God's not a liar. So the kingdom was set up in the days of the Roman kings, and it was set up by God. Now, look at the book of Hebrews, chapter 12. He's going to talk about two kingdoms there. He's going to talk about the Mosaic law and that kingdom, a physical kingdom. And then he's going to talk about the church, which is here described, it's contrasted the two, Mount Sinai, Mount Zion. Okay. We're going to pick up verse 18 of Hebrews chapter 12. For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest. Okay, what mountain is that describing? Sinai. Sinai. That's where the lightning and the fire and and darkness, all those things came. That's Sinai. And the writer says you've not come to that. You've not come to that. So now listen. And to the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. And that's just what the Jews did, didn't it? When God spoke, the people said, tell him not to talk to us anymore. He can talk to you, and you come tell us. By the way, my wife and I just passed through that reading in our daily Bible reading. We read through the Bible every year together. We just passed through that a few days ago. So that's the beginning. Now, verse 20. For they could not endure what was commanded, and if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it should be stoned or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I'm exceedingly afraid and trembling. But you have come to Mount Zion. All right, wait a minute. Where's Zion?
That's the church.
Jerusalem.
Yes, it ultimately it represents church. Where is Zion? Zion.
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Right.
Jerusalem. Because that's where the church was established, shall we say. That's where it really gets going, begins. So, but you've come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. He's not talking about an earthly kingdom. He's talking about the heavenly kingdom. Okay, very important to see that. Uh, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn. Okay, wait a minute. Who are or who is the church of the firstborn? Well, who's the firstborn?
Jesus Christ.
Okay, now Mario, you have fallen into the same trap I fell into. I mean, the identical. I wrote an article years ago and I submitted it to Brother Basil Overton. Brother Overton was a wonderful man and a great editor. He accepted many, many, many of my articles and never said a word. He always accepted them as they were. He got this article I was writing about. Instead of many churches, there ought to be one. And I was describing names, that could be used and things like that. And I said, here in Hebrews chapter 12, there's a church of the firstborn, and Jesus is the firstborn from the dead. Well, Brother Overton sent, now in those days, you didn't send it by email. We didn't have email. So you sent it by a letter, when it went through the postal system. And I got this letter back and it had my article, that one article, it had it in there. And he said, yes, Jesus is the firstborn from the dead, but in Hebrews chapter 12, the General Assembly and Church of the Firstborn is not the Church of Jesus, because technically it ought to be translated the firstborn ones, O-N-E-S. And watch what it says, because the rest of the verse will tip you off. But Mario, I didn't see it, so I'm not attacking you. I didn't see it either. Okay, listen to what he says. Who are registered in heaven? We're talking about people registered in heaven. All right, if we are the assembly of the firstborn ones, what are we firstborn about? What makes us be that way?
Right, so when it comes to us, that'd be the resurrection, as told by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15.
That's
Was that your question? I'm sorry?
That's the
Huh?
second. Why are we today, right now, if you're a member of the church, and I understand you are, so if you're a member of the church, you are a firstborn. Firstborn how?
Wild guess here. Would you be talking about John 3, about being born again?
Yes. Yes. Couple that with Romans chapter 6. where he says, buried with Christ by baptism into death, that like as Christ raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so you also should walk in newness of life. You're born from the death of sin. Listen to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1. And you hath he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins. You're firstborn from the death of sin. You will be born again, so to speak, when you're raised from the dead later. But right now, you've been raised from the death of sin, if you're a Christian. And I believe you are. I'm not challenging that. But okay. Everybody with me on that? You see all, okay, go ahead, Obed. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm getting the this understanding a bit complicated because I've always read that passage to mean the firstborn from the dead is Christ, and now this new interpretation is challenging that original traditional thought. So I'm taking my time to, as it were, digest all these um, new information now.
Okay. Hopefully, Obed, you've written down these verses and you're going to consider them. So you got
Yeah.
John chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. You've got Romans chapter 6, especially verses 3 and 4. And then you have Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1, which says, really, you has he made alive who were dead. So we are born from the first death. And the first death is spiritual death. It's the death in sin. Right. Okay, yes, David.
Yes, I was looking at it and it makes sense because of how it's written, because it's talking about the firstborn, but then talks in plural, are written. And later it mentioned God, the judge of all, and then mentioned Jesus. So it's talking about different persons there. It's mentioning
Exactly.
all of them.
You're exactly right, David. You're following the context.
Mhm.
And so Brother Overton said, what he said was firstborn is plural. And if you're translating it into English, the best way to translate would be firstborn ones, ONES. And it's talking about us, about Christians. And David is exactly right. Let's go ahead and read the rest, and then we'll take a break. I'm sorry. I'm running a little bit long, but I'll give you a break. We'll read what he was reading to you. To the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. All right, the blood of sprinkling is Jesus' blood. So what have we come to? We've come to a kingdom in which we are born again from the death of sin because of the blood of Jesus. And we now are joined in a certain sense with the greater family of God, which includes just men made perfect. Who might that be? Well, my inclination is to say Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the faithful of the Old Testament. That's my inclination to think that. Now, you might argue I'm wrong on that, but you're not going to successfully argue I'm wrong on the other. because I'm correct in that. And look, I came to it the hard way. I had to rewrite that article. I had to restudy this thing. And this is what I came to. Any other questions on just this point? We're going to go forward. Any questions further? Okay, we're going to let's take a 15-minute break and we'll come back. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes. read something on Facebook. You what?
I got a message.
Oh, you already
I believe Holly,
yeah,
and then she sent it in.
I said it to you, yeah. I can't take it right now. Would you like to go outside? You want to go outside? I know you'd like to go some other way. But would you like to go outside for a while? I really am almost certain that you got, uh, you said you had a crick in your neck or something like that. I'm almost positive it was that side. And then you said, well, it helped it some, but it was still there. So I have wondered, you got an hour until my class is over. I wondered if you ought to take a crown of pencil. See if that will make sense. You don't have to spend half a day. How many you got in your box? Let's get you another. Let's get two. So we'll know that you had one of your three. Okay? Go ahead. Where did you put your pills? Oh, they're right here. Never mind. Never mind. I found. The form. Read First John chapter 1, period. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, period. What are we going to do about those sins? Question mark. The answer is you walk in light. His blood continually cleanses us. Period. He's sitting on the external throne. He's surveying everything that exists in the sun. Very Spencer is a arbitrary technology heart. Now, he fails to upset himself. What you think, Taylor?
I think a lot of things sometimes. I may not know nothing.
Well, is the class helping? He's starting to get a little glimpse of Daniel.
Well, I do good as long as I stay on subject, but once we go off rabbit holes, my mind goes sideways.
Yeah, I get it. All right,
And then
anybody
I'm
else?
sitting there trying to figure out how we tie it all back together.
Okay, well, give it time. Some of it will tie in. If you keep notes, what I've found is sometimes when I keep notes later, I go back and all of it goes together because now I know a little bit more than I did before. So
Yeah.
that's what happens with me. I'll put it that way.
Brother
I
Hampton.
tend on going back, and a lot of times I'll listen to these again and I'll pick up on stuff the second time I did in the first. So
Yeah, yeah, I get it. Chip, was that you? What you got?
Yes, sir. Um, Definitely make some time at the end of this class that we can hear some more information about this millennialism, premillennialism, postmillennialism. I am just chasing my tail over here.
All right.
It's a
As I
lot of
said,
information to try to digest.
yeah, somewhere, right? Put a note that you'll know how to go back to it. I'd tell you all that. And something that we covered, we touched on in class that you wanted to elaborate on, let me know. I think we'll have time at the end. We're going to find out about that. Okay, so we're back to the book of Daniel. We're in chapter 2. He's finished telling the dream to Nebuchadnezzar. And so now in verse 46, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. Now, this is a little bit difficult for us to some extent because it looks like Daniel's accepting worship. And the only way I can resolve it in my mind is that Daniel has already clearly made known that he only represents God, that he represents the will of God. And so I think he is acknowledging that this worship belongs to God. That's the only way I can justify it. So I'm going to leave it at that because there's no more to discuss. That's just how I've resolved it in my mind. The king answered Daniel and said, "Truly, your God is the God of gods." Now, see, he's not quit being a polytheist. He's still a polytheist. But he now knows that God is the God of gods. So he's made a step. He's got some more to go, and I think chapter 4 may finish that off. but for now, he's made a step. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Also, Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Okay, a question came up in our last time together, and now I want to try to tie the shoelace together, so to speak, because in Hebrew writing they do what's called Hebrew parallelism. Sometimes parallelism is merely restating the same thing in different words, so you're sure you understand it. But other times, parallelism is where you give a general overview of what happened, and then you go into the specifics. I believe that chapter 1 is an overview of how Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all become uh, uh, or come into positions of power in Babylon. Somebody wondered, and did Daniel not know about what the king was upset about? Remember at the beginning of chapter 2? And I think the answer may be that Daniel's still in training, that Daniel's still in his 3 years. And notice at the end of this chapter, he does what we heard he did in chapter 1. So it appears to me that chapter 2 is a more detailed explanation of how Daniel ended up being governor over everything instead of just over a small section like the other three were, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. They end up over also ruling, but not in the same sense that Daniel does. Daniel's over all the wise men. So that's my explanation for that as we see it here. And now we have Daniel in this seat of power. In those days, the city gate was the seat of power, and he sits in the city gate. He's not on the throne, but he sits in the city gate. Any questions about chapter 2? All right, then we're ready for chapter 3, which in the notes that you have is 04, God protects his people. 04, God protects his people. It should be in, well, it is in the LMS because I checked all that out to be sure. It's there. So, but now if you need to know how to get it, you need to talk to Dave, not me. Because I'm not that guy. I don't know. I barely can get in there myself. So, all right. Chapter 3 opens up. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Okay, if we're putting this into our language in the United States, we'd say the image is 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. And that may be 9 feet square. I don't know, but approximately. It's in the plain of Dura, which is an open space. It's covered with gold, and it really would be a dazzling sight. And that's what Stafford North said, and I think he's right about that. Verse 14 may suggest it was a god. We'll come to that later, but do you want to notice that? It may have been an idol. That's the point. And it's an idol dedicated to Nebuchadnezzar. And you might say, well, that's strange. Well, not really. The Roman kings later on, the Caesars, would have idols dedicated to themselves as well. And they would declare themselves to be gods. So this is not totally unusual. In fact, in the land of Egypt, which predates Babylon in terms of world power, in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh was considered a god. And so when the firstborn dies, the God of heaven has effectively killed the Pharaoh. He's killed one of the gods of Egypt because the firstborn of Pharaoh would have been the next ruler. Okay, so that's what it appears to be. In fact, every plague, it appears to me, eliminates any belief in a god in Egypt. Like the Nile was a god, so bang, it's gone. The sun was a god. Well, darkness, takes care of that, doesn't it? And on we could go. We start listing all of those. So I don't think this is that unusual that a king would do that. Representatives of the 7 classes of leadership in the land were commanded to be present for the dedication. a herald made an announcement. So let's read the announcement in verse 4. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So, the herald makes an announcement. Notice it's to all peoples, nations, and languages. That's not the last time that we will see that phraseology. It occurs again in verse 7. It occurs in verse 29. It occurs in chapter 4, verse 1. Notice, Nebuchadnezzar the king to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. It's in 519, 625, and 714. And what it denotes is everyone in the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. Wherever they're from, it's directed to all of them. And so that is who the herald is talking to. So at the sounding of various instruments, all were to prostrate themselves. And one of the key words for worship in the New Testament is proskuneo. And proskuneo means to prostrate oneself. So imagine a fellow falling down on his face with his hands straight ahead of him, laying on the ground. That's effectively what he's doing. And it is worship. They're to worship before the image. Failure to bow down would result in punishment. They'd be thrown into the fiery furnace. For heathen captives, this was not a problem, since it would merely be an acknowledgement that the Babylonian gods were more powerful. Well, they were. Now you got to think like a heathen for just a minute. Whoever wins the battle, his god's the strongest. So if you are a heathen that's been conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, then obviously your God's not as strong as his God. So bow down and worship, no problem. They worshipped all kinds of gods anyway. So what difference does one more make, to them? But it's going to be a problem for the Hebrews, and that's what we're going to see as we continue. Verse 7. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, if it was not an idol, they treated it like one because they worshiped it. So I think it was an idol, but if you don't choose to take that position, well, then they treated it like an idol at the very minimum. Okay, verse 8. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regards to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up." Notice what Young said in his commentary. But for devout Jews to worship this statue would have been to deny their cherished conviction that there is one alone to whom worship is due. So think about the Ten Commandments, Exodus chapter 20. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So this is a problem for Jewish boys. Uh, Possible responses: anticipate what would happen and stay home. They could have done that. They did not. So, no, they could bow, but say within themselves they did not mean it. And by the way, that's pretty much what the Romans tried to force the Christians to do. Polycarp, if you've ever read of him, is a prime example. The Romans wanted him to bow down and worship Caesar, and Polycarp basically said, I'm above 80 years old, and he said, I've never worshipped anybody but the God of heaven. I'm not going to start now. I'm putting that in my words, but it's similar to that. And they said, please just acknowledge that Caesar is all powerful. And he basically said, I can't do that. And so they burned him at the stake. That was the answer to that. But the Romans wanted Christians to do this. Just bow down, but don't mean it when you do it, is kind of the idea. They could have bowed partially and hoped that no one notices. They could stand erect and take the consequences. And guess which one they took? They stood erect and took the consequences. That is their response. And by the way, I got those ideas from Stafford North in a good article that he wrote about all of this. Now, I do want us to remember right here that Daniel had saved the wise men. In Daniel chapter 2, he said, don't kill everybody. Let me have a chance to talk to my God. God knows the interpretation. Some Chaldeans accused, and the word accused here that is used when it gets down to talking about that, they accused. That word literally translated in from Hebrew into English is they ate their pieces. Kind of an interesting way to put it, but who did they do that to? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, of not serving the gods of Babylon or bowing down before the image. Young says the charge implies ingratitude, since they had been honored by giving them positions. And that may well be true, because remember, at the end of chapter 1, they are put in powerful positions as they serve. And we see even more of that about Daniel in chapter 2. But Daniel's not found in this situation. Why he's not, we're not told. Did he not have to come? Well, it's possible that he didn't have to come. I don't know. Would be my best answer. All right, pick up verse 13, chapter 3 of Daniel. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Okay, is it a god? Notice he says, you're not worshiping the image. So there's a suggestion there. Yes, it is a god. Is it? It's an image of Nebuchadnezzar. Looks like, so that he's considering himself a god. Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Now, I want you to remember, I told you at the end of chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had taken the first step, but he didn't thoroughly believe in the God of heaven. Not yet. He knew he was a God. I get that. But he didn't acknowledge him as the greatest God, the only real God. And you can see that right here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar first responds in rage and fury. His anger is boiling when he begins to talk to them. He thought he was greater than God. Who's God going to save you from me? So he thinks he's more powerful than God. The three depended on God that they served, though he might be unable to save them. Now, why might God be unable to save them? He's omnipotent, right? Okay, here is the answer that Kyle gives. And if you've never seen those books, I don't know if you can get them on Logos or something, but Kyle and Delitzsch are tremendous. Now sometimes they go into a discussion of some Hebrew word, and I don't know Hebrew, so but I just keep reading. I look for the English and I read it because they're very good. They're very good commentators, and they're conservative in their views, and they actually make references to the New Testament, which makes me suspect that they honored the New Testament. They were German. And their commentaries had to be translated into English. Kyle says the word here where it says if God cannot save them, the word denotes ethical ability, which would be limited by his holiness and righteousness. In other words, he might not be able to save them because some aspect of this would cause him to not appear as holy, or he would not be righteous in doing it. So they say he's able to save us. He can deliver us. But if not, it's okay. We're not bound down. So they don't know the limits of God. Now, by the way, a sermon you might develop sometime, you might think about this. Take a sheet of paper, okay? In the top left corner, and I realize I'm looking this way. Well, you see me. Is it left for you all, or is that my right? For you all, that's right. Okay, in the top left corner, it's all confused for me, I can tell you that. In the top left corner, put the word holy. God is holy. He's totally free from sin. In the bottom left corner, put just. God is just. He demands punishment for sin. So if we sin, we offend God's holiness, and he will punish us with it because of his justice. But in the top right corner, now put the word mercy. Mercy is bending to help someone who cannot help himself. So my sin has offended God's holiness, and his justice demands that I pay the price. But his mercy, he bends down to take care of me despite what I cannot do. And in the bottom right corner, put love. Because in his love, he sent his son. That came out of his mercy. It satisfied his justice and did not offend his holiness, because now we are holy like he is. Okay, that'll make a sermon. Now you're gonna have to add some verses to it, but that'll get you started. You
I
want to
think
talk about
this
his holiness and us. You want to go to First Peter. He talks about it. Yeah. What you got, Chip?
I just love this state of mind, this mindset that these men have, um, because they understand something that I struggle with, which is God's time, not mine. In essence, they're saying, well, if it's God's time, then He'll take care of it. If it's not, it's okay because we know what we need to do,
Yeah.
and we're going to continue to do what we need to do, whether He steps in or not. I mean, man, what a mindset.
Yeah.
We need to
They
adopt
will
that
not.
one.
They will not violate their principles. I don't care what it is. They're not going to do it. And the big question for us is, what will we do? See, you look at First Peter chapter 1 and verses 6 and 7, particularly. It says, "In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ." What are you going to do? The world's going to challenge you like Nebuchadnezzar challenged them. What are you going to do? Now go down to chapter 4, verse 12, same First Peter. And there he says, "Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. We will be tested." They were, but we will as well. And I think that's the critical matter for us to understand. All right, what happened? Well, the king really acts now rashly out of anger. And I want us to see that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. Verse 19 of Daniel 4. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. All right, so he acts out of uncontrolled anger. He's rashly angry. That won't work out. It did not work out for Moses. It cost him the promised land. He could not go in. And it looks like Moses himself writes about it in Psalm 106, verses 32 and 33. But it will also cost us. The wise man in Proverbs 19:9, Proverbs 27:4, and Proverbs 29:8 warns us about our anger. Additionally, in Ephesians chapter 4, and that's the only one I'm going to really read, Ephesians chapter 4, the Christians at Ephesus heard instructions from Paul. And they begin in verse 25, where he says, "Therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath." Notice he says be angry, and I don't believe he's commanding us to be angry, but he's assuming we will occasionally be angry. So what are you going to do with it? Don't sin. That's what he says. He says, "Don't let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil." When I let my anger get out of control, the devil takes charge. And that's exactly what happened to Moses. And it cost Moses the promised land. And if we're not careful, our anger will also cost us the promised land. But our promised land is heaven, and I don't want to lose it. I don't think you do either. All right. The men who actually cast him into the fire, look what happens to them. We're back at Daniel now. Chapter 4, verse 22. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You might say, well, how did it do that? Well, I don't know if it burned them up or if it sucked all the oxygen up. Either one would kill them. Fire takes away the oxygen. That's why firefighters in the United States wear a oxygen tank on their back and they wear masks so they can breathe oxygen while they're going into the fire to try to bring people out because it takes away. So which way they die, I don't know. The flame killed them. Did it kill them by taking up all the oxygen or did it kill them by burning them up? Does it make a difference? They're dead. That's the key. They're dead. The rashness of Nebuchadnezzar has now cost him some of his strongest men in the army. So he's already paid a price of sorts. Now watch. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound, into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to the counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said to the king, True, O king. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Okay, they cast 3 men into the fire, but he sees 4 men. His description is that he sees the Son of Deity. Is that who this is? Well, I don't have a good answer. Is this Jesus? Is it a theophany, as they call it, a manifestation of Jesus or of God in the Old Testament? Maybe. It's possible. But whatever the case may be, that's what he sees. And these guys are loose. Now watch how this goes forward. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Now, do you notice he's changed a little bit in his attitude? Who is the God that's going to save you? And now he says, servants of the Most High God. See, that's a change. Now, I still don't think he really knows who God is, okay? Not totally. But he's kind of headed that way, isn't he? He's learning a little bit more as we go along. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Have you guys ever dealt with a fire? You don't have to stir it, but just a second, and the smell just permeates your clothes. But these fellows have been in the middle of the fire and no smell. Now, only God could do that. Okay, that's the critical thing. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. See, who's going to deliver you? Well, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's who's going to do it. And he praises him here, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, what's Nebuchadnezzar learned? There's God more powerful than Nebuchadnezzar. And the ones that serve him are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, quickly, we want to look at Isaiah 43. I think it helps us see this a little bit or understand it. Isaiah 43, we're going to look at the first 3 verses. But now, thus says the Lord, who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I've called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I gave Egypt for your ransom, and Ethiopia and Seba in your place, since you were precious in my sight. And I think that in Daniel chapter 3, we have a representation of how God will do that in the case of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Any questions or comments about chapter 3? Yes, Obed.
Yes, thank you very much, Brother Hampton, sorry, for this lesson. Um, I just want to ask a quick one. In the chapters we just looked at, there is constant reference to gods by Nebuchadnezzar, and there's this question I always want to. It bothers me. I just want a clarification from you. So when we look at the entirety of scriptures, there is always an emphasis, or there's the strong emphasis placed on the fact that there is only one true God. So I want to find out if there are other gods that are in existence, that are real, but out of these other gods, there is just one of them that is superior to these gods. Or are there false gods? In other words, are there no other gods with the exception of the one God that we know, that is the God of the heavens and the earth? I always find it a bit confusing whether there are um, there are many gods, and out of these many gods, there is one God that is above all of them. Or there are no many gods, there's just one God, because there is reference to the God being sometimes in the Bible the God of gods, the King of kings, the Lord
Yeah.
of lords. So I just
Right.
want a clarification.
Okay. There are not many gods, not in reality. Men worship what they call gods. But now you give you an example. Look at, I think it's Isaiah 44. I'm pretty sure it is. I didn't prepare for that discussion, but maybe if I can find what I'm looking for. Uh, yeah. Uh, Start at verse 14. He cuts down cedars for himself. That's a tree. And takes the cypress and the oak. He secures it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a pine, and the rain nourishes it. Then it shall be for a man to burn. For he will take some of it and warm himself. Yes, he kindles it and bakes bread. Indeed, he makes a god and worships it. See that? Is that a god? No, it's a false god. But he's making it anyway. He makes it a carved image and falls down to it. He burns half of it in the fire. With this half, he eats meat. He roasts a roast and is satisfied. He even warms himself and says, I am warm. I've seen the fire. And the rest of it he makes into a god, his carved image. He falls down before it and worships it, prays to it, and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." So, are there other gods? No, not in reality. But man makes gods. Man worships false gods. Okay, Chip. Yes.
It's going to be down the same pathway here. I have to agree with Obed. There are times when I read the Bible and I kind of get this question. The real question popped up for me when we were studying Exodus, and we see these magicians able to do things that
With their
are
magic arts. See, they're
right.
using magic. You ever
Is it
watch?
trickery?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, we have magicians today, and they won't tell their secrets to how they do it, but they deceive you. They'll talk about the hand is quicker than the eye, and boy, it is. They move those hands around, and I can't keep up. Which shell is the pea under? I don't
Well,
know.
these are some pretty serious things that they were doing in Egypt.
Well, yeah, but they didn't. Okay, they didn't turn the whole Nile River into blood.
No, they didn't. No.
They made it appear that they turned water in a basin or a pitcher into blood. They made it appear that way. How'd they do that? Well, I don't know. I don't know how they made it look that way, but that's all they did. And you notice it doesn't. God finally finishes them off. They say we can't do this. We're not able to do that. They had not worked their magic in that way. Let me give you another passage quickly. This is from Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 18. What profit is the image that its maker should carve it, the molded image, a teacher of lies, that the maker of its mold should trust in it to make mute idols? Woe to him who says to wood, "Awake!" To silent stone, "Arise, it shall teach." Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, yet in it there's no breath at all. Now, what about this? Some of you possibly took Kings and Chronicles. Go to 1 Kings chapter 18 and watch Elijah, boy, just mock the Baal. There are 450 prophets of Baal that are offering, trying to get Baal to accept the sacrifice by burning it up with fire from heaven. That's what they're trying to do. And they're not succeeding. They go from morning sacrifice, that's about 9 o'clock, till noon, and Baal hadn't answered yet. And so now Elijah in verse 27 of 1 Kings 18, we find, and so it was at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, "Cry aloud, for he is a God. Either he is meditating, or he is busy, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's sleeping and must be awakened." By the way, one of those, and I forget which one, because the old King James I could have told you. One of those is maybe he's in the bathroom. Maybe Baal's not hearing you because he's in the bathroom. For 3 hours, he's been in the bathroom. See, Elijah is making fun of, they call him a god, Baal. Is he a god? The answer is clear. No. He is not a god. They treat him like a god, but he is not a god. Okay. Paul deals the same thing at Mars Hill. You look at Acts chapter 17. And by the way, Athens in the days of Paul had, according to some historians, 30,000 idols. And the population of Athens, 10,000 people. So one Roman, we call him a stand-up comic. They call him satirist. One Roman satirist said, in Athens, it's easier to find a god than it is to find a man. And it was. Okay. I hope that helps a little bit. Any any way I can improve the class? So we got a couple of minutes left. Yes, go ahead, Ernest.
Okay, so I want to add to what Obed was asking. I said I want to add to what Obed was asking. The
Oh,
question that he asked.
Obed was trying to be sure that there's only one God, the
Good.
God of
So
heaven. Yeah.
yes, so my this is my as a comment on that. I think Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. I don't know if you can hear me.
Where was that again?
Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8 to
Okay.
9.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of scholars have brought up the idea that it is indeed the Lord who gave all these nations their gods. Because right now, if you tell someone who is, let's say, an Indian, that there are no gods, I think a person will find it very difficult to accept that. So, though I know there are other gods, Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 19 tells us that because of the saints of the world, God decided to choose one nation to teach the whole uh, other, or say all the other nations, that there is indeed one true God.
Yeah.
So I believe there is only a one true God, which is the God
Yeah.
of the Bible. And it is this God of the Bible that chose one nation, which is Israel, and decided to divide the other nations with the other gods that was present. Because I know the idea of gods started after the flood. And then during the time of Nimrod, the Tower of Babel, that was when the whole idea of people starting to worship other gods came in. So this is what maybe I have to add. Then we can also do more research on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think basically you and I are in agreement. Okay, Chip. Oh, you didn't have anything. Okay. Anybody else? Now remember, I also want to know if there's any way I can improve the class. Is this a viable way to do it? Is there something I need to change? I'm open to suggestions. I will not dye my hair black, but other than that.
Yeah, I think I you can maintain the background as you have today. That's a beautiful wardrobe you have behind you.
Well, you can thank my wife. It's just, I'm at our house right now, and normally the background I have is at my office, all those books behind me. But she needs to go see a doctor this morning, so I stayed here instead of going.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll tell.
The
I'll,
books look a bit intimidating. This is much better.
I will. Obed, I will tell her that you praised her beautiful dining room.
Oh, brother, is it okay if I could just jump in for a minute into brother Chip's question? Yes. There are these verses in the Bible. Thinking of Second Thessalonians 2:9, for example, how this man of lawlessness will come with the power of Satan and do great signs and wonders. And I believe something like this, interestingly enough, is in Matthew 24 as well, how people pretending to be Christ and pretending to be false prophets will come with signs and wonders. I'm also thinking about Job 1, by the way, how Satan could execute some kind of power. Um, of course, it was allowed by God, but miraculous power at the very least. Uh, Myself, I've oftentimes over spiritualized things and thinking that every old trick is a matter of the spiritual, which I now believe that's not the case. But I've also believed that every quote unquote sign of wonder. It is just pure foolery, for lack of a better word. So, would you be open to the possibility? I'm raising the flag again, that Satan might execute some kind of power allowed by God in this world?
No, he does not.
Huh.
In fact, in Job, what you see, you don't, there's no miracle there. God permits him to work in some way. Uh, so fire comes out of heaven. Could that be lightning? I think it could be. Uh, that'd be my answer. Uh, Raiders come and steal things. Well, that God lifted his protection away from Job enough so that they could steal from him. So that a wind, we have tornadoes here. I think other parts of the world have typhoons and hurricanes and whatnot. People die. Uh, is God not able to prevent that? Well, he's able to, but is it consistent with his nature to do so? And I think the answer would be no. So I don't think the devil worked any miracles. I think God permitted him to use uh, just common everyday things, so to speak. Thieves are common. For example, and I've used that. Lightning's common. The wind, a bad storm, is common. It's just that God lifted his protection and allowed those things to happen. Uh, you may remember that Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." So human beings can be agents of the devil unwittingly, I might even add. So that'd be my short answer. There's probably a longer one. All
Thank
right.
you, brother.
I have promised not to run too. Okay, Ernest, what you got?
Gary, it's been brought to my attention that some of the students who speak English as a second language or English at a foreign language level are sometimes having a difficulty keeping up with your vocabulary.
Uh-oh. I don't know that I can rectify that.
Okay.
What you're going to have to do, what I would encourage the students to do, is if I use a word you don't understand, immediately, as soon as possible, because sometimes I'm looking down reading, but that would be
Understood.
biblical. That'd be biblical language. But when I look up, if you'll hold your hand up, I think I'll catch it. I'm having to look at a whole bank of you. Okay, I think maybe
Understood.
see that. But I'll do my best if you tell me, not you, but whoever,
Understood. Whoever it is, yes.
just tell me, yeah, raise your hand and say, what does that mean? I'll never forget. And look, I'm running past time, but you're the one in the Philippines, not me. So, uh, when I was in Malawi, I had a translator that I promised you, he stayed with me word for word. And when if I was pointing like this, they took pictures of the two of us working together, he was doing the same thing. And one day I said, okay, we want to cover all our bases. And it was dead silent. And I looked over at Pascal. I said, what's the problem? He said, what does this mean? Cover all the bases. He didn't know about baseball. He knew
Right.
about cricket, but he didn't know anything about baseball. And so he did not know that just meant let's make sure that we cover everything, is all that meant. So if you got a question about some part of my vocabulary, please raise your hand or do your best to jot down the word. I know you won't, don't worry about spelling it. You just got to be able to let me know what the word is so I'll then try to simplify it. Okay? All right. Don't forget, you got to watch the third video of Brother Spruill. And I'll see you, Lord willing, on Wednesday.
God willing. Thank you, Gary. Oh, Gary.
Yes.
I've already turned on the LMS. I've already turned in my PowerPoint. and a link to the video I preached on Sunday.
Okay. Okay.
It's not due yet, but it's done.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Well, anybody can turn them in when they're ready. That's fine. The only thing is, and this is not me, it's Dave, because I'm still getting educated about that. You're supposed to submit that in another part of the LMS, and
Yep.
you may need to get Dave to tell you. I can find it. I saw it the other day. So but we may need to move it. Okay. Talk to you later.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much, brother.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it.